Hey guys, and welcome back to another Keeper of Indigenous Voices podcast episode. I'm Ronnie, pronouns they and them. I am French-Irish Métis with Cree, Ojibwe, and Cheyenne ancestry, adopted by the Polish and the Germans. Today I am joined by a guest co-host, Stephanie Witkowski, who is Executive Director of 7,000 Languages. I'll let her introduce herself to you guys now.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. Hello, my name is Stephanie Witkowski. I am non-Indigenous and I live in Southern California. I live on the ancestral territories of the Ahachiman and the Tongva people. I'm really happy to be here with you today in my role as Executive Director of 7,000 Languages. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad to have you here because in previous episodes, I've talked about my absolute love of Indigenous languages. I've done a lot with Ojibwe. I have learned Cree. I've tried to learn Dakota. I want to learn more. I should mention that as you had said which land you are recording from, I am recording from in Manitoba, treaties 2, 3, and 4, mostly 2, as that's where my university is located. And that is mostly Ojibwe and Cree lands. And so I wanted to do the land acknowledgement as well, because I realized in previous episodes I've actually failed to do so, but that was mostly due to me being not totally comfortable exposing where I am. But as I've done more and more episodes, I've become a lot more comfortable with it, as well as exposing my identity and different things like that. So the first question I have for you, Stephanie, is what is 7,000 languages? What's its purpose? What's its aim? I guess that's 3 questions, but it's all kind of rolled together in one.
It absolutely is. Yeah, it absolutely is. So the mission of our organization is to empower and help Indigenous communities or communities that speak endangered languages to help them teach, learn, and sustain their languages. So it's a pretty broad mission, but we do that through several resources. The probably key program that we offer to Indigenous communities is an online language learning course creation program. So we work really closely with Indigenous communities to create like their own sort of Rosetta Stone for their language. We don't charge them anything to create this. Our goal is definitely for communities to continue to speak, teach, and learn their language. So we think it's critical that all of these communities have access to these same resources that, English or Spanish have. So that's kind of our key program, but we do much more than that. Often as we establish a relationship with a community partner, we find that support is needed in the space of curriculum development or helping to even create a standardization. So we try to provide as many resources as possible as our partners need. And if we don't know the answers, we also try to connect our partners with other resources available to Indigenous communities. So while our goal is to kind of create this online language course, it ends up becoming a much bigger endeavor as we learn more about the needs of Indigenous communities.
Yeah, I love that. I think I discovered you guys when I was initially researching linguistics, because I think I've mentioned before that I wanted to go into linguistics because I'm not so great at the speaking part of languages, even though I love them.
Mm-hmm.
I love phonetics. I love how words are put together. I especially love how descriptive Indigenous languages are.
Yeah.
I find that, despite how different each of the languages are from each other, they're just so wonderfully descriptive. And I don't know, even just hearing it spoken is, relaxing. I found Minecraft videos of people speaking Ojibwe. It was fantastic.
Wow, I love that. Yeah. That's a really good point. With our online courses, some of them are more writing intensive, but a lot of them there's audio and images. So I think it's a really good place for people who are interested in languages, interested in their Indigenous languages or languages of perhaps spoken or Indigenous to the lands that we currently reside on. And the goal with our courses is, I think, for people to get that comfort level, wherever that is. Maybe you're more interested in writing or reading in a language. Maybe you're more interested in just hearing it. Maybe you want to learn to speak it a bit better. So I think that's the cool thing about our courses. And you kind of get to do it, from the comfort of your own home. You get to feel that sort of comfort because language learning is about making mistakes. And it can be really uncomfortable and it can be really scary. And I think for a lot of Indigenous people, there's a sense of even shame at times that they don't know the language, they don't speak the language anymore. So I hope that our program helps people to feel that comfort and that sort of security and that safety of like beginning their language learning journey. We don't think that our courses are going to save languages per se. I think, language reclamation definitely happens in the home and in the community, but we hope that we're supporting those efforts. And so I love that. I love that you kind of came from sort of a linguistics point of view, but then once you're learning these languages, you get so immersed in the beauty of the language, the beauty of the culture, the beauty of the land even. I mean, you think you're just learning a language, but you're not. You're learning about the stories and what the language is explaining.
Yeah, I just like figuring out like what the different words like are trying to describe, and I'm not sure what the original word for the Red River was, but that's around close to where I am. And the Red River was actually like supposed to translate to like a river of blood or something like that. Mm-hmm. Just because of the amount of flooding it always happened with it. Same with like Canada. It was originally Kanata. I don't know which language it was. One of the ones on the East Coast, I think, near like Newfoundland or Nova Scotia, something like that. Mm-hmm. And it means little village. And even Manitoba, the original word for that is Manitoba, which means spirit, which has a lot to do with like Louis Riel's spiritual beliefs, because he was very much like Christian and everything like that. So it's like, it's just fascinating to figure out where these words come from. Like even the words that Ojibwe has for the United States. Trying to remember, it's like very long word. But it basically means a knife in the ground.
What?
And it's supposed to symbolize the separation of borders that never existed prior to that.
Mm-hmm.
So I find those so fascinating, and actually it covers a lot of the questions I had for later on, but I wanted to know specifically, what is your role within 7,000 Languages?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm the executive director, which is a funny kind of position because it tends to be a catch-all for everything and anything. We're a really small team at 7,000 Languages. There's myself as executive director. We have one project coordinator who really does the bulk of creating the online language learning materials with our community partners. That's sort of day-to-day process. And then we also have a community engagement manager, and she does a lot more of the outreach. She creates really wonderful content on our website. We do a lot of events. So she really puts all of that together so that sort of the larger community gains more awareness about language endangerment, but also so that our partners and the communities that we work with know that we're here and know that there's resources available. So she does that. And so I just kind of figure out what else needs to get done in between those two positions. And it ends up being a lot. A lot of what I do actually involves trying to find funding for our partners who are doing this really critical, really hard work of documenting and revitalizing their languages, trying to find funding for our nonprofit organization because we don't charge communities for any of the work we do. So that tends to be a lot of my responsibilities. And the responsibilities of an executive director just to sort of oversee the mission and the vision of the organization and be sure that we are continuing to represent our partners as best as possible. And thinking about how we can grow our mission and how we can reach more people. So it's a bit broad. It sort of encompasses a lot, but I'm really privileged and really honored, I think, to be in this position, to be able to lead this organization.
Yeah, it definitely seems like a really big position to fill. Like, it just looks like, it seems like, almost a lot, but like at the same time, it's just such a great thing to work towards.
It is.
Me, like, just smile.
Yeah, I mean, it comes with a lot of responsibility. We work really hard in our organization to represent the Indigenous communities we work with appropriately. We have to continuously sort of learn, especially as a non-Indigenous person. I really have to make sure that I am in a space of continuously learning and acknowledging my role and acknowledging the limitations of my position. So it comes with a lot of responsibility, but I think one of the joys is that I get to, really hopefully move the needle a bit really hopefully push forward and serve Indigenous communities and raise awareness. And I like to think that we're getting the word out there. And I like to think that overall, as a society, we're coming to value the importance of all languages. So yeah, I think it's really important work.
Like, I've been attending university for years and years now. Like, I've taken the slow path to my bachelor's degree, and I'm in a very small department, the Native Studies department.
Yeah.
And there's been 3 professors I've seen over the course of like 8 years. And then this past year, we've had a number of other professors hired onto the department finally after years, and they're actually non-Indigenous. And it was a bit fascinating to learn a little bit more from like non-Indigenous perspective, just because like they're willing to acknowledge a lot of things that like other parties are not. And it's nice to see that progress, I guess.
That's a great way of looking at it. Yeah. Yeah, I hope so. I'm often feeling though, too, that, there needs to be more Indigenous voices in these broader conversations about policy and about infrastructure, and about language learning, and about technology. We need more Indigenous voices. So, I have to acknowledge that I can only view this work through my lens as a non-Indigenous person, right? I don't speak any Indigenous languages fluently, so I don't have that lens or that way to view the world. That's one of the cool things about languages. You sort of get a new way of viewing the world, and I have to acknowledge that I don't have that. I have a very, very like colonial way sometimes of doing my work, which obviously is rewarded in our society a lot. But I think more and more, I think we definitely need those Indigenous perspectives in all spaces. So it's interesting. I like that you kind of recognized and welcomed the non-Indigenous perspective in a Native Studies department. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, because it was like certainly a different experience for me. It was one I like never expected, just because of the professors I've had forever. And they've been there longer than I have,
Of course.
So it's like getting new professors is a bit interesting, and them acknowledging, like, one of my professors, he said he came from a German background where it was a lot of stuff from the war, from his ancestry, that he was trying to sort of acknowledge, and he uses that to acknowledge he doesn't know everything about Indigenous people, even though he actually studied it, So it was, he shared that entire story our first class. It was a 3-hour class, and I'm like, this is fantastic. This is like what is like needed.
Yeah.
And you actually brought it up in a previous point, but I wanted to talk about your guys' partners. Like, is there some you can name, and like how can like a regular person just like come up and help, because I think this is like a fantastic organization.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, a lot of our partners tend to be organizations that are either Native or Indigenous led organizations, or they work really closely with those communities. One of them is the Manitoba First Nations Education Resource Center. We partnered with them to create, I want to say 5 or 6 language courses. We have a partner in Alaska, Doyon Foundation. We've created 9 courses with them. So we often partner with these sort of big organizations, but sometimes we partner with, in the United States, we call them like tribal nations. So Comanche Nation, Cherokee Nation, these sovereign Indigenous nations in the United States, we partner with them. Sometimes we do partner just with like a group of individuals who know their language and they want it to be available widely, and they want it to be revitalized. Those are always, really cool stories as well. Just people who are incredibly passionate. So those are some of our partners. In terms of people who want to work with us or volunteer or partner with us, but they don't speak an Indigenous language fluently, they're not going to create a course, we would love for people to reach out. We can always use people who know more about technology resources. We can always use people who know about communications too, because I think a large part of what we do is advocacy, and we create events and we create content, and we're just trying to spread the word. So we would love it. We love anybody with any sort of skill set or talent who really wants to get involved with the work we're doing. You can always head to our website, which is pretty easy. It's www.7000.org. We have a contact us button, and we're always eager to hear from people who have like a real passion and a real interest in this work. That's how I came to this work. I just had a passion, I think, for for language revitalization really early on when I was in high school, and I didn't know much about it, and I was really naive. My sort of thoughts about language endangerment, it was very like perhaps white savior, like I'll just come in and save a language. It's like that's not how it happens. So I've learned a lot along my way, but you have to start somewhere, and so I'm always eager to connect with people who are just passionate and just kind of don't know where to begin, but think this is really important.
My role in this kind of like language thing was like, I just, you have to, for the major I'm in, you need to take 2 Indigenous languages classes. And I took it just because, whatever, plus really cheap textbooks. That's always a plus. But I really liked the way my instructor talk. She was also a student at the same time. She was like, she's still even writing her master's, and she's interested in like rural communities and stuff like that. But she would teach classes to university students, high school students, just to sort of like revitalize the language, because this is something she was able to learn and able to share. And I fell in love with it, especially the way she helped break down all the words to a way I could learn it. Because like I said, I'm not a great speaker. I'm not good at the conversation part of it. I can speak it okay at a word at a time, things like that. Even doing my Ojibwe poetry was like just intense, because I was always scared I was going to stumble up the words and that. But like I love putting the words together, and I just fell in love with the class through my instructor, and she's actually given me some of my best grades. So it's like just going through that, and then just I kind of want to have her on the podcast as well, just because like I want to show off like this is the woman who taught me my language. And
you should. That reminds me about a couple things. One, we had this event in January, and one of the panelists, she created an online language course with us for her language, Michif language. And she said that the only way for her language to survive was if people fell in love with it. And I loved that sentiment. And it was kind of reinforced in a book that I read as well, from Anton Troyer, The Language Warriors Manifesto. We read this book. And he said the same thing about language revitalization. He says, kind of like having a baby, like you never have time, you never have the money, you never have enough resources, but you just fall in love. You fall in love with this little person. And it sounds like that's what happened to you. It sounds like you just fell in love. You fell in love with the language. And once you do that, what else can you do?
I grew up in a French Métis household, and we really more focused on the French. Like I was in French immersion up until grade 10. But for some reason, French immersion only teaches advanced math, not basic math. So I failed out of French because of that. But my family actually didn't speak French, at least not the way we know it in Canada or even in France. It's a mix of everything. Like some of the words we speak aren't French. And it turns out we were speaking a variant of Métis. And my grandma actually, this is the organization I put it out to my grandmother, because she wants to find a dictionary of the language she was speaking growing up, because she's the one who taught her 9 siblings how to speak English so they could go to school. So it's like, and like Michif isn't something that overly interests me as much, just because like I grew up knowing French, so it's like sort of like kind of to me. But with the Indigenous languages, it's just, I love it. I even found dictionaries from the 1800s, and it was just so like, it's kind of amazing how kind of racist they are, because they can get
it's real problematic.
I have a book of phrases from 1826, and it's like this Indian wants $5. I'm like, that doesn't feel right.
That's a good point, because I even feel that way as a linguist. Like my background, I have a master's degree in linguistics. There is this very rightfully, very deserved hesitation on working with linguists or anthropologists, because for the longest time, I have to acknowledge my field was problematic, incredibly problematic. It was a field of people who would go into communities and just take resources, take language, or take artifacts, and claim ownership over it.
Not even full understanding, because of the way certain like languages were used. It doesn't quite translate to a colonial mindset either. Like it's so easy to like make crude jokes in languages and everything like that. but you do that in English and it's like, oh my God, so scandalous, things like that. And it's just like, I read an essay by Thompson Highway. He is fantastic because he wrote like Kiss of the Fur Queen, and he's a Cree speaker who survived residential school.
Wow.
And he said Cree is the sexiest language, and you could just make inappropriate jokes, and it's like hilarious, and you do the giggle, because like I find the laughter of Indigenous women to be like, oh, just wonderful. But that might be because I grew up around a lot, so it's like, but you do that in English and it's just suddenly inappropriate. It's like even the people who know the language, you hear it in English and it's like, oh my God.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point. You can't just translate from language A to language B. It carries with it so much more meaning and the customs and the sense of relationship, and that doesn't all carry over. That's a really good point.
Yeah, but I like seeing where the words go and things like that. And like I want to learn Dene, but then like finding out that there's like more than one version of Dene, I'm like, which one do I learn? And it's like, and can I pronounce it? Because like my sister currently lives around Vancouver Island, and I cannot pronounce the name of the language there. And I don't want to try because I feel like if I mispronounce it, I'll be insulting. It's like for 5 years, I had a roommate from who came from China, and she would always go by her surname because it's the easiest to pronounce. And I asked her, how do you pronounce your first name? And she's like, nope, don't try. It's like, because her first name had 2 X's, a G, an L. It's like, and I wanted to know how to pronounce it so I could be respectful to her, but she's like, no, calling me by my last name is just as fine. And it's like, because I only learned a few words in Mandarin even then living with her, so it's like, okay, I can respect that.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask about if people wanted to utilize your guys' organization to learn, how would they go about doing that? I think we covered it, but just to, I don't know, clarify, I guess.
No, yeah, absolutely. The coolest thing is that all the courses we work on are available for free right on our website. So if anybody is just interested in just learning a less commonly taught language or an Indigenous language, and maybe the language is spoken where you live, head over to our website, 7000.org, and you'll see a list of all the languages we've worked on. And you can learn a little bit about it. Then you can go in and you can actually access the course for free. They're all free, which I think is so cool. And hopefully that's just your entry point and you fall in love and you learn much more and you become an activist like us.
Yeah, like when I first discovered your guys' website, like I would just click on the languages because like can't try to pronounce them, so I'll leave it at that. But I liked that it had, this is where it's spoken, it has the map, it has the geographical location, which is very important to each of the languages because like with like even moose, like just seeing where that is very important to the language. Same with like bears and turtles and stuff based on different clans.
Yep.
And then seeing an example of one of the words in the language and seeing what it translates to is like, oh, I just loved seeing that. It was fantastic. Because it's sort of how I look at the language is more from, I guess, a broader perspective than a speaker's perspective. But
of course,
I loved it.
Oh, good. Yeah, we have 22 languages right now on our website and 46 courses. So some of the languages have multiple courses. They'll have a beginner's course and a more advanced course, or they'll have a course. Naskapi, for example, there's a course for English speakers, but a course for French speakers as well.
Oh, nice.
It's spoken up in Canada where there's a lot of French too. So we have a lot of courses to browse through, dive into a language, or just explore. All of that is wonderful and all of that is welcomed. You know, I think that with the partners we work with, that's part of their goal. They really want to share information about themselves and they want people to kind of come to understand who they are. So absolutely, go to our website. We're really happy for people to explore and learn.
Yeah, because I find that like with the use of the technology, like a lot of people tend to shy away from that because it's like not traditional or something like that. And, you know, of course it isn't, because it's like something that is part of the colonial world. It's kind of something that people shy away from. But I find through the use of technology, people actually stumble across storytelling, which is a huge, huge part of the Indigenous peoples across North America, as far as I'm aware anyways. And like even through my own Ojibwe poetry, apparently I created storytelling by accident, because all my poetry is very personal. They tell all my stories and my journeys through like my depression and through my cultural identity discovery and different things like that.
Yeah.
And apparently I was telling a story. So it's like, and each of these stories have significant deep meanings. Like I love just like finding the translations for them. Because of course I wrote them all in English first. It's my first language. And then translated them, which some people were like, why'd you do that? Why didn't you do it in Ojibwe first? And I'm like, I really can't. But finding the translations were the most fascinating because there's actually no word for poetry in Ojibwe. So finding a word for poetry in a book of poetry in Ojibwe was like fantastic. I think I put it as all the words. That's what it translates to for me.
That's beautiful.
And like not every translation is specific to each person. That's my translation. Same with my Two-Spirit identity. I have a definition for it, but that's not everybody's definition for it. Right. So it's like, it like transcends all of that. So it's like, that's how I, figure my language to be. So especially with the word Bannock, I love the word Bannock in English and in the Indigenous languages. Like,
what is it in Ojibwe?
Ojibwe, it's, the plural form is Bakwajiganigan. It also means bread. So it's like, that creates Bakwajigan. So it's like so similar. It's enough to throw me off. And it's like, but this languages are different, but similar in phonetics. And that's enough for me to just, I can't. I didn't do as good in Korea as I did in Ojibwe. But
you brought up a good point. I think you brought up a really, really good point about this sort of space and the connection between language and technology, and this idea that somehow languages are traditional or ancient, even, especially Indigenous languages. This technology is modern, and that the two shall not mix. And I think a lot of people have that feeling, and I think it's worth exploring and challenging, because the truth is that Indigenous people exist today. They're modern people, like you. Indigenous people are going to school. They live in houses. They're modern, and they're using modern technology. So I think modern technology and I think Indigenous languages absolutely belong together. I think a disconnect that has to be remedied is that there aren't a lot of Indigenous voices, I think, represented in technology, right? It's a very like Silicon Valley kind of a thing where we use this sort of same technology. And so I think that a big challenge of technology is not being able to capture those Indigenous ways of expression, Indigenous ways of knowing, like you just mentioned, storytelling. And technology and language learning technology also can't capture oftentimes the sort of beautiful complexity and descriptive nature of a lot of at least North American Indigenous languages, which are not noun-based, a lot of them are very verb-based. And the technology we use just isn't always built for that. And I think that's because there's not a lot of Indigenous representation in technology spaces. But I think that language doesn't always have to be seen as like this artifact or this relic of the past. I think that the way to revitalize and reclaim these languages are to indeed find the spaces for them in a modern world, including online language learning courses. So I thought you brought up a really good point.
Yeah, because like I simply stumbled across some languages by accident. Because like I literally went into my major because it had the cheapest textbooks. But it also had the smallest department because I'm not a very good crowd person. So I liked the smaller classes, and they're a lot more intimate when they're smaller. And I think that sort of helps with the traditional sort of teaching because it's very much more holistic. And like we always like put our desks in a circle or our tables, whatever we're in. Well, at least we did more than 2 years ago.
Right.
And just like figuring out how to storytell from that perspective. Because one of my professors is a very academic person, but he's the one who introduced me to linguistics. But my other professor that I've known for just as long, she is a storyteller academic. And I like the way she writes. Like I have a very complex vocabulary, of course, because, my mind, I think, thinks linguistically, but out loud. And then using the languages sort of helped me calm down my language a bit in order to tell stories. And that's how she's told like her classes is through her stories, but also through academics, which is like the perfect mix, I think. But that's also personal perspective.
Yeah.
But I had a few sort of personal questions for you.
Okay.
I wanted to know what languages and cultural identity means like to you specifically, because you said you are not Indigenous, but you also have the passion for at least language revitalization. So
Yeah, what a fabulous question. I mean, yeah, it's a funny thing when I think about identity too. A lot of like white people in America, they feel like a sense of connection to another culture, another country, even. And so my background is very mixed as well, and I definitely feel a deep connection. I'm like part French, part Italian, and I've always felt that connection there. As I thought about my identity. But the other thing that is interesting, I think, with identity and language for me is that I'm also like part Black on my mom's side. And so there is no connection on that side between language because we don't know the languages that my ancestors spoke who came over, on slave ships, right? We don't know. They were taken away from them. I have no way to trace them back to land or to space. And so I often think about that. And I think about that with my identity. And I think about that connection because, obviously who you are, even without language, it still is whole. And you still have that deep connection to, your ancestors, immediate and far distant. But I do, when I think about the sort of connection with like French and Italian, which are languages that I absolutely loved learning when I was young. French was my first foreign language. You start to feel that, I think, sense of like belonging. I think a lot of white people too really start to feel that. You feel that sense of belonging. And then I think I really wish I knew more about the languages that my ancestors spoke, who were Black, came from Africa. And I think not having that often feels, I don't know, I think it leaves a space in me that is always curious and always wondering. And I think partially that's why I got so involved in language revitalization, language reclamation. So that's just a little bit about me and my story. But I definitely came to language revitalization, I think, because I was just always eager to see more of the world and to explore and to connect with people. And I probably have always felt that way, even from a really young age. And so I found that when you are able to learn part of a language, even, you just are able to learn so much more about a group of people, and you're able to really grow as an individual as well. You're able to sort of see the world differently. And I found that always to be very true, no matter the language, Indigenous or not, I've always found that to be true for me.
Yeah, I believe that African languages are just as varied and complex and descriptive as North American Indigenous languages are. So I've heard a few words spoken here or there. One of my classmates married a man from Africa. I can't pronounce the name of the country, the specific country in Africa, but his language is really beautiful, and they combined both of their languages to name their son, and it's just it's such a gorgeous, gorgeous name. All the little boys got his dad's eyes, but his mommy's skin tone is just so beautiful.
Oh, yeah. I wish I knew more. I wish I knew more about where in, I'm sure kind of West Africa somewhere, what language, what that was like. I think it would feel like really special for me to learn that. But
So I find I asked my mom what do you feel when I speak the languages, and because I'm not what do you hear, no, what do you feel? Because I connected with Ojibwe the most, and she's I feel at ease. And she's never heard the language before in her life. She didn't even do great in French, but that was just because it wasn't her thing. She's much more of a math-oriented person than I am, and I think it's just that feeling you get when you have the language, even if you just hear a word and you don't know what it means. Yeah. My grandma, she'd go to bingo 3 times a week, but one of her table neighbors was an Inuit woman, and she would bring some of her family over, and they just talk. And apparently the language was really whispered all the time, but it's almost that's how it was spoken. Just because I think in more of the north it was just empty, so the voice carried more, and just the inflection and everything like that. And I just always go off topic when it's language related, because I love the feeling it gives me. So it's like,
but isn't that the point? Yeah, isn't that the point? That language it's never just about language, right? It's about feelings, and it's about identity, and it's about stories, and it's about people, because that's how we use language. We use it primarily to connect with people and to share ourselves and learn about others.
I find it so strange that like primary English speakers who don't know another language, they're always just like so protective of English, saying like, this is English, this is what everyone speaks, yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, you do realize English is a conglomeration of like 50 languages. It's a bunch of words thrown together to create another language. It's like Tower of Babel,
Yeah.
Like, the example I use is the word video, Video is a Latin word. Latin is a very dead language, and it's thousands of years old, and yet they're using it for something modern. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, look at that before you try to, shove away another language. It's just like, so many languages are interconnected and spliced in English. And
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Like just English itself is so rich in other cultures, and it's spread a lot. But I think the other thing too, all across the world, it feels like almost except for North America, or like except for America or Canada, maybe to a degree, it's like all across the world, people are bilingual, trilingual, babies learn multiple languages, and they're still residents of that country. They still have identity. Like, you don't have to speak just one language, and often I think we are it's to the detriment of our children to not be a nation that encourages bilingualism or trilingualism. And it's a shame that feeling of like, because language, this is who we are, is to the detriment of our babies.
Yeah, like the roommate I had mentioned earlier, my Chinese roommate, like she and her boyfriend, English is not their first language. In fact, they come from different dialects of Chinese. She came from Mandarin, while he came from Cantonese. Mm-hmm. And the fact that their first language isn't English, they're living in Canada, they're speaking it. They're speaking it to me, and apparently they use me to learn better English because I speak so fast. But I think they're geniuses because, they're living in a country where their primary language isn't even taught, really, except for like the offhand class. And I just think they're, fantastic for just learning a language so well that they can speak it enough to convey what they want,
Same.
I actually had another question for you, but I think it actually covered pretty much all the questions I had. I was wondering if there's anything else you wanted to share.
Oh, yeah, no, I'll just keep plugging our website, 7000.org. I'll just keep plugging that. I hope people who have enjoyed this conversation come visit us, contact us, learn some of the languages, and support the work that we're doing. We, like I mentioned, we're a nonprofit. We don't charge the communities we work with. So we need support from people who are just as passionate as you are. I really had a pleasure talking with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it was so great to talk to you again. And I got so excited by talking about languages that I forgot to do my own plugging.
Plug!
So, I want to thank Planksip. They're the ones who are helping me put together this podcast, helping me edit it, put it up. They're publishing my articles based on Indigenous stuff as well as gender. And it's possible to go to them and help co-create different articles through their website. A pre-recorded ad will show right now. And I also want to thank Bifama Homes for helping to sponsor us as well. They are a home building organization. They build mini homes, and it is their aim to sort of help the less fortunate communities across Canada, although more specifically British Columbia is where they're located at the moment, and to help lower income communities to build the homes that are very much needed. So I want to thank both Planksip and Bifama Homes for helping me with this recording, and I want to thank Stephanie and 7000 Languages for coming to talk to me because I appreciate it just so much.
Oh, no, thank you.
Yeah. And so this is another episode of Keepers of Indigenous Voices, and I want to thank you guys all for joining me, and I hope you guys will go check out Planksip and 7000 Languages. Thank you and goodbye.